Let's talk a little bit about what is happening on the latest in terms of Syria. Um, Yesterday, it was reported that in the course of an interview, John Kerry was asked if there were any steps that Assad, the Syrian president, could take to avert an American-led attack. John Kerry's response, quote, sure, he could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons to the international community in the next week, turn it over, all of it without delay, and allow full and total accounting. Upon hearing that, apparently, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said on Monday that it would urge Syria to do just that. And within hours, I believe, Lavrov was had already either spoken to or came out and announced that the Syrian foreign minister, Walid al-Muallim, who was in talks in Moscow, had accepted that deal, which really had not quite existed at that point. This happens all over the course of less than 24 hours, or presumably took place over the course of less than 24 hours. President Obama then said that this proposal by Russia, which was building upon a hypothetical by Secretary of State Kerry, was a potentially positive development. In the meantime, it was argued yesterday to congressional leaders that this development was a function of the United States beginning the process, or at least of creating a credible threat of attack on Syria, which moved the Russians, who had, as before yesterday, claimed that Syria had no chemical weapons, to basically look for a means in which they could intercede. And so much of this gets back to what we were talking about on Friday, which was that the only sort of positive way out of this. Now, and understand, to the extent that we're talking about a positive way out of this, all we're simply talking about is preventing U.S. intervention at this point, where there has been no credible argument that our intervention would do any good, other than setting down some type of marker for the future. I got an email from a member of the program who has been a longtime fan of the program. He said, I am not opposed to acting against Syria in some form as a response to their use of chemical weapons. It's not hard for me to say it. I don't get what all this wailing is about. I also don't understand why you're so flippant and dismissive about what Assad did. I'm not flippant and dismissive of it. Not just of the chemical attacks, but of everything Assad has done in dealing with this rebellion, what started off as basically as peaceful protests. It's not enough to point out hypocrisy, he says. It's like you're saying that because the U.S. committed atrocities against Africans, we should not have fought in World War II. I'm not sure I follow that. Did not agree with Iraq because there was no reason to be there. Please help me understand why you're not able to see this point. Well, my point is that I don't see what we are supposedly going to achieve by intervening at this point. And it has not been clearly articulated. In fact, the administration has said, I think Secretary of State Kerry said that this attack would be unbelievably small. It is unclear what we are supposed to achieve. I'm not saying that I would agree with the purpose of an unbelievably big attack, but I don't understand what we are supposed to achieve here with an unbelievably small attack. The message that we are supposedly sending to Assad is that if you use chemical weapons, we're going to attack you in an unbelievably small way. There has been no credible argument by the U.S. government that we can deter him, we can degrade his ability to launch a chemical attack. Because we've already said that we're not going to attack those caches of chemical weapons, because it would be quite obviously very dangerous for those people around there. There is no argument, as far as I can tell, a credible argument, that this would prevent a further attack by Assad if he deems it's necessary, nor that by not attacking it would encourage a future attack. We never attacked Iraq in the early 90s when they gassed their own people, and short of uses of chemical weapons that we engaged in, there has not been another incident of another country using them that was at least a foe of ours. With all that said, on Friday, I also speculated about something that there is at least some reporting. I mean, one of the questions I had or would have liked to have seen in the Hayes interview of Secretary of State Kerry was, how do we know? Do we have evidence that this attack was ordered by Assad? Not that this attack was perpetrated by the Syrian army, because I think the evidence there is fairly conclusive. But that's a different thing than saying, did Assad order this attack? In other words, if the whole theory is we need to send a message to Assad, well, is the message going to be effective if he never made that active choice in the first place? And on Friday night, I believe it was, or Saturday, the 7th, Reuters had a piece, which was the first piece I had seen sort of at least pursuing this question. No direct link to President Bashar al-Assad or his inner circle has been publicly demonstrated, and some U.S. sources say intelligence experts are not sure whether Syrian leader knew of the attack before it was launched or was only informed about it afterward. While U.S. officials say Assad is responsible for the chemical weapon strike, even if he did not directly order it, they have not been able to fully describe the chain of command for August 21 attack in the Ghouta area east of the Syrian capital. It may be the case that Assad is legally responsible, obviously, of anything that takes place in his regime, but we're talking about legal technicalities all of a sudden when we're not following any legal authority in which to attack this country. By what body? This, the same rules or laws that would say that Assad is responsible for what his regime does are the ones that we would be flouting by not looking for any authorization to launch this attack, which is problematic. You can make that argument, well, that morally he's still responsible, but this isn't a question of morality here. This is a question of our attempting to do something to change his future behavior. And that becomes a lot more convoluted if it is unclear that Assad ordered this. And then on Sunday, The Guardian reports that the German press is reporting that German intelligence intercepted a series of phone calls off of a ship operated by their intelligence agency, and the intercepted communications suggest Assad was not himself involved in last month's attack or other instances when the government forces have allegedly used chemical weapons. Now, this does not mean that Assad is a good guy. It simply means that the justification and the rationale used to support an attack on Syria does not necessarily have any logical basis. It's very possible And it seems to me easy to imagine that Assad does not have full control over his forces, and or that it could be just, a commander is told, you've got to clear out this area right here. And he says, all right, well, I'm going to use chemical weapons to do it. Like I say, it's not a situation where Assad has a dongle and you need this little dongle to unlock the basement where we keep the chemical weapons. It just doesn't work that way. But the point of all this is simply to say that the arguments on the efficacy of what John Kerry has called an unbelievably small attack are just have not been made. And yes, I mean, it could have been another senior member of the Assad regime. We just don't know. So where it stands now is essentially members of Congress are being told that, look, this march to an attack has already paid dividends insofar as it's brought the Soviet Union to bring the Syrians to the table, at least in terms of, Russia. I dated myself. Russia, to bring the Syrians to some type of negotiating table. In some ways, there's an argument out there that this strengthens the case of the administration to get this authorization. Now, I want to remind you, this was also the argument that the Bush administration used when it came to Iraq, right? I mean, I think this is why Hillary Clinton said that she had voted for it. We understood this as a point of leverage, not that they would actually use it to get the Iraqis to give up their weapons of mass destruction. So the whole thing is a bit of a mess. Unclear what happens next. My guess is that there's going to be an attempt by the Senate and then subsequently the House, if the House was even going to take a vote at this point, to delay this vote so that there can be some room to see if there can be some progress on this. Now, make no mistake, I don't know that I would actually believe that the Russians or the Syrians are going to deliver all of Syria's chemical weapons, or if they'll provide access to them or what. But if the agenda here was limited insofar as preventing another chemical attack, it seems that this would do it, as well as an unbelievably small attack on Syria, whatever that means. And that has been the supposed stated goal of anybody who has been in favor, short of, the John McCains and Lindsey Grahams, of course, who want simply to occupy another country somewhere in the region. And if that's the stated goals, that's the stated goals. Again, this in no way is meant to be dismissive of or diminish the horrible tragedy that's happening in Syria. But the reality is that a country's got to know its limitations. And if we don't have any ability to in any way stop this fighting, we don't have the ability to do it. And just simply acting out of frustration because we see tremendous death and destruction, and we want to do something about it, which I'm certainly inclined to want to do something about it. But if there is no good options, there are no good options. And that doesn't mean that there won't be good options down the road. That's just the situation we're in right now. And, to some extent, there's a certain amount of hubris, even amongst those people who have good intentions here. There are times where there's just no good solutions. And acting for the sake of acting, so that we can feel some type of, that we have met some type of moral obligation, but the results of that act end up creating more death and destruction, is simply unacceptable as far as I can tell.